Hey, how's it going?
Good. Thanks for being interested in coming on my show. It's great to meet you.
Oh, yeah, you too. No problem.
Yeah. So, um, I'm not very good at starting, but like, have you introduce yourself?
Oh, that's fine. Yeah, so, I don't know a great way to introduce, but yeah, Adam Muller. I have my own podcast called the Goesnowwheredoesnothing podcast. It's kind of a fun little Star Trek reference if you're a Star Trek fan. Yeah, did you know that Goes Nowhere Does Nothing reference for that?
I didn't, but I still think it's a cool name.
Yeah, it's back during the original run of the original Star Trek, they on the boards and everything, those buttons and stuff that they would hit, you had buttons and levers that would function, that would open like the doors and move things, but there were also a lot that were just stationary, that were more aesthetic. And what they would market for the actors, they would put GNDN with a number on it, which stood for Goes Nowhere Does Nothing, meaning this button doesn't move. So the actors knew not to touch it. We kind of thought that was a fun little thing, and we put that as our podcast name.
Was that the original, or was that like the newer movies?
Well, actually, it started as the original show, and they continued it on for the movies. Yep, they still do it to this day.
Oh, cool. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, that's fine. I'm 40, 41 in a couple months. I know I don't look that age, but I am. I lost my left eye to cancer when I was 2 years old, and had to actually endure a lot of bullying and stuff because of that. And then was diagnosed with ADHD as a child, because with boys it's actually it's diagnosed usually much earlier. And then had a lot of traumatic events that happened, and then I actually had a counselor tell me that I've been through so much that she's amazed that I haven't become like addicted to a million things and just like had my life spiral. And I was like, well, yeah, I had video games and my grandfather to keep me away from that. So,
do you mind if we start with bullying, as you just mentioned?
Yeah, that's fine.
So, like, how bad was the bullying? I'm assuming it was as a child, like middle school, elementary. Like, how bad was it for you?
It got to be pretty bad sometimes. I mean, it started with just like name calling and stuff like that. And then it eventually went into people would just kind of target me, just start beating me up in the hallways just because I look different. And then I lived in one school district until I was 16. And right after my sophomore year, my mom forced me to go to this one camp, that was for cancer patients. Really didn't want to go, but I ended up going. I was there for a week. And then I got moved. My mom, actually, the day that I came back from summer camp, a camp I didn't really even want to go to, she told me that we were moving to Minnesota, which was about 6 hours from where we lived. And I finished out my my high school years there, just the last 2 years. So, of course, meeting a whole bunch of new people, right in the middle of everything going on with the eye and everything. I got moved, and then, of course, there I hadn't even established anybody. Nobody knew who I was. So, of course, it started out with just the whispers again, kind of people looking at me, pointing at me. And then, most people got to know me there. But then there were a few that were just like, oh, he looks weird, and would just try to shove me around.
So, like the average just middle school bully kind of thing.
Yeah, middle school, high school. And of course there I actually I didn't know that I was super angry at the time, but I was, as a kid. And I actually did get into a little bit of trouble for not really starting fights, but I wasn't always going to just sit there and take it either.
What do you mean? Like, I know what you mean by angry, but like, how so?
So we kind of got to go back a little bit. With my upbringing, I was bullied by not only kids, but I was also bullied by some teachers as well. And then when we got to Minnesota, some of the teachers were so bad. Like, some of them told me that it was my fault that other kids would be uncomfortable around me because I didn't wear a patch. As you can see, I'm not wearing a patch. Yeah. And they would tell me that other kids being uncomfortable was my fault and I needed to wear a patch. And that then I even had one teacher like try to force it on me. I told my mom during a parent-teacher conference that I was causing problems by just not wearing a patch.
Like, did your parents take your side? Or?
So my dad is a whole nother story, but my mom took my side. My mom actually looked right at her and said, if you want to pay for them, he'll wear them. but I'm not going to force him to wear anything he doesn't want to or something he's not comfortable to. And then the teacher backed down really quick after that.
Is that like how bad it got, or is there like how bad did it get?
So it got really bad. It got to the point every day, on top of everything else that was going on, dealing with the bullying with the teachers and the students, and then everything else that was going on in my life at that time. It got to a point where I know this is going to be on YouTube, and I don't want to get you demonetized, but I seriously considered, I don't know how they say it, I considered unaliving myself.
Suicide?
Yes. I didn't know if you guys if you wanted to say that or not.
I can just bleep it out if it's a problem.
Okay. Yeah. So it was almost like, did you ever see the movie Lethal Weapon, the first one?
I have never heard of it. Sorry.
Oh, that's fine. So, I mean, there's a scene in there where Mel Gibson, he's kind of off the rails, he's a little unhinged. And Danny Glover is that really hard-nosed, straight, everything's by the book kind of thing. And well, it turns out that Mel Gibson's character is suicidal. And every single morning he wakes up, he puts a bullet in a gun and puts it into his mouth. And then he even says at one point, he says, every morning I put a gun in my mouth and I have to think of a reason not to do it every day. And that was what it was like for me too. I got to a point where I was on a lot of medications. So I would just look at my pill bottles when my mom was at work or something. I would just look at my pill bottles and just think, if I mixed all of them, and just chugged them all, I would just go to sleep, and then none of this would ever be a problem again. Or if I was going through a time like in the bathroom, I knew where my pocket knives were at, and I would literally just like turn the water on so that my mom thought I was in the shower. And I'd sit there and stare at those pocket knives and just be like, do I do it this way or this way? I would just think like, what's the best way to do this so that they can't save me? I would even have the knife like right there by the wrist, ready to go. And I would have to sit there and think of a reason not to do it. And those reasons were usually, it could be something so small. It could be that, I was playing Grand Theft Auto Vice City at the time, and I wanted to see the next level, and I hadn't got to the next level. I wanted to see the end of that game. It could be that we were planning on having pizza that night, and I wanted pizza. It could be that I would never see my dog again. It was literally just any small thing, and I could just be like, oh, and I'm a big gamer, so I'd read Game Informer was the big magazine at the time, and I'd be like, I just saw an ad for a game I want to play. If I do this, I can't play it,
Trying to think of any way you could still like keep yourself here. Is that like a way you coped with it, or like how did you cope with all of that?
So on top of, I kind of want to go back a little bit. On top of the bullying with the stuff with my eye, I was also assaulted by somebody that I was supposed to trust the most. I don't really want to say who it is on here.
You don't have to.
But yeah, I was sexually assaulted. I was physically assaulted, mentally assaulted, emotionally, for almost from when I was born until I was about 12, and then it even got worse in the high school years. It got worse until I figured out how to fight back, essentially. And it even still has happened a little bit, but not now. I know as an adult, like, screw that guy, So the way that I was able to cope with it was actually turning to writing, and was turning to the video games, and was specifically the violent video games, and turning to music, specifically rap music, rap and heavy metal and new metal. And even though my mom wasn't necessarily a fan of my entertainment, she knew that it was helping me. So, screaming along with Eminem when he's singing the song Kim, if you've ever heard that song,
Yeah, it's a good
while it sounds like a very intense, very violent song, it actually was bringing that anger up to the surface and letting me have an out. When I was writing my own rap lyrics, and I was writing some of the most violent, vile stuff that you could possibly think of. Like, think of the Insane Clown Posse and multiply that by 10. So Yeah, so I was going full on with that. So, but honestly, that helped me sharpen up my writing skills, because then I realized as I was writing them, I was like, this is disjointed. This makes no sense. And then I would start rewriting the songs and then structuring it. And that's actually made it so now I know how to structure stories and write actual books. So in a way it's helped, but that's really how I've coped with a lot of it. Just I turned to the entertainment, I turned to the writing, and now ever since I met my wife, I now can turn to her too. And she actually has a friend who is a psychology major who I can go talk to if I really got any issues.
Going into like talking about your wife, what age did you meet your wife?
I was 22 and she was 25.
But if you don't mind me asking, like how did that all happen?
It's actually kind of a fun story. So, and this is gonna out the way that I used to be, which I'm not always proud of. But there was one day my mom and I were, my mom, my sister and I were in Rockford, Illinois. And I had on a shirt, that had, kind of not the nicest saying on it, but, this person walked up to me and said, "Hey, nice shirt." And who I would later learn was my wife, walked by and said, "Yeah, that's a nice shirt." And a few years later, I didn't have a lot of girlfriends growing up. I had only two. I had like one in high school and one right after high school, and then didn't date anybody for 4 years before I met her. Um, we actually, I was living at my mom's. I was kind of disappointed with the way my life was going. Early 20s. I was living with my mom at the time and wanted to get out on my own. All my friends had their own apartments and everything. I went on a dating site, which was Yahoo Personals. I don't think it's around anymore, but Yahoo Personals. And I was matched with, about 2,000 people right off the bat. But one of the first ones that popped up was her picture. And of course I sent out messages to other girls, but she was one that I was like, I kind of want to know her. I sent her a message, and she actually had just started dating somebody at the time, because a lot of people don't take their dating profiles down after one date. Um, and I just told her, I was like, "Oh yeah, I'm not looking for anything super serious. Just, if you want to be a friend or whatever." So we started just IMing each other, and didn't think anything. I didn't have anything to say with her relationship with the other guy. And then she told me they broke up, and shortly after she started dating somebody else. Shortly after that, didn't last very long, but shortly after that, I want to say it was about 5 months after, because I was not ready to ask for a phone number yet. But about 5 months after, I asked her for her phone number. Then we started texting and talking on the phone. And about 6 months later, she asked if I wanted to hang out with her. So I took one day, went up to Rockford. I lived in Sycamore at the time, which was only about 45 minutes away. So there really wasn't a meeting area in the middle. So I met at the mall, because if you're meeting somebody online, you should really meet in a public spot. Yeah, so we went to the mall. We ended up having a date, and we've been together ever since.
How did she react when she learned that you had cancer? Like,
Yeah, so I put it on my dating profile that I only had one on, but apparently I didn't have the greatest photo at that time, and that was back during the times where you had the flip phone. So now we can take the selfies like this, but back then you had to like angle it and do all this weird stuff. So yeah, I didn't have the best picture to show it, but she knew by reading it. And the day that we met, she looked at me, and at first she couldn't look me right in the eye. She was just kind of looking all around. But then as the date progressed, as the date continued, she started looking at me more and more. And by about, I'd say, an hour and a half into it, she didn't even notice it anymore.
what was the next date like? Like, how did it go after that?
So the next date, because we had talked for so long, we felt like we had gotten a lot of the introduction stuff out of the way. So the very next date that we had was really smooth. We kind of took it slow. We went for a walk around one of the historical parks by her. I actually met her mom on our first date, and her mom wanted to see me on the second date. So Because it was one of those where she didn't bring her mom along, but it was one of those where I didn't know my way around the town at the time. So she was the one who was driving, and then she said, "Hey, I got to stop at my mom's real quick." And her mom said, "Hey, yeah, bring that new guy or whatever." So her mom and her sister actually didn't ask me directly, but they asked her like after the second date what had happened to my eye, and they just took it as, "Oh wow, he's been through a lot," and then it's never really been brought up, but usually unless they're curious about things that happened growing up or something like that, which I'm pretty open about.
Has your wife been like a person you can go to if like you're having a bad day or like like back when you were really angry? Like, is she that kind of person you go to?
Oh yeah. Oh, definitely. She's the first one I go to.
Is it just like a usual thing for her? Like, how does she feel like when she sees that side of you?
So yeah, she has seen that side of me before. Usually, she's the one that can guide me and get me out of my own head. Because if I get super angry and if I start like kind of just being real quiet, and she can tell when I'm up here, or if I'm not in an explosive, because I don't really have explosive anger, but she's usually the one that can just say, "Hey, let's do this, let's talk about this," or she'll be the one to actually open it up and be like, "Hey, let's talk about this. Now you see how this is kind of silly. You shouldn't react like this, or you should react like this." She's usually the one to lay it out and kind of say, "Hey," kind of guide me through it, so to speak, if that makes
Yeah, I get
sense.
that. So like in a sense, like the Black Widow Hulk kind of.
Yeah. I was gonna say that's the great thing about both of us having ADHD, because there's a lot of times where I will freak out about something that the average person would be like, "What are you doing?" And she sits there and understands it, and there's times where she'll have the same kind of reaction, and I'll be like, "Can you see? Okay, let's step out and look at it this way,"
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that's where having ADHD has actually helped, since we both don't even necessarily need to explain why we're feeling that way.
Jumping back to like your childhood, back when you were like born and you were diagnosed with cancer and like I mean all the abuse. How did your family feel about everything going on? Like once they found out like about the abuse mainly.
So my mom was not happy about it. She actually went to the school a couple of times, and some of the teachers there were very open to trying to get the other kids to stop. Um, at one point, though, I was told that I was in the class with some really mean ones. My mom, I remember she went there and talked to them. She was not very happy. My grandparents were kind of born in that era where "don't tell me you're being bullied, you deal with it yourself" kind of thing. And that's not to talk bad about them, but that's just how their generation was. My mom actually put me into to a self-defense class, which I never really got into very much. But a lot of the bullying in the main school that I went to, a lot of the bullying stopped after I actually kicked the biggest bully in the school. Came up and just shoved me for no reason, and I don't know what came over me, but I literally took his legs out from under him in front of the whole hallway, just sent him straight down to the ground. And of course, he got up and everything was my fault. But yeah, a lot of people didn't mess with me after that.
You swiped his legs and made him fall. Oh.
Yep. Yeah, he just came up and started shoving me, and as he went to walk away, I kicked him right in the right where your knee bends and everything. Kicked him right down, and he went boom like a sack of potatoes.
Was it like a one-time thing, or did you keep using those like for protection?
With that guy, that was a one-time thing, because I did that, and then he actually ended up getting suspended for the rest of the year for that, and I got 1 day of the in-school suspension for an hour during my study hall. Like, what was I going to do during study hall anyway? I did the same thing I did in the in-school suspension. I just sat there,
exactly,
just did my math.
What about the other abuse? Like with you don't have to say the name, but like how did your family feel about the other kind of abuse that didn't happen at school?
So the person that did sexual abuse, my mom found out about it, and she worked for the public defender's office at that time. So she knew lawyers, and it's kind of weird to say this now, but because now if you just even say that something happened, instantly they'll arrest them, their allegations, they'll run all this stuff. But back then, the lawyers that they said that because there wasn't it wasn't the physical act, but it was it was unwanted touching of a sexual nature, but it was not full on abuse. Like I wasn't full on raped or anything like that. So they couldn't, at that time, they were saying that they really couldn't do anything because there was no evidence. It's just the word of a kid versus the word of an adult.
What do you mean you weren't full on raped?
So I was grabbed
down there.
Yeah, I was grabbed down there multiple times for several years. And then I was told that I was never told it was my fault, but I was told don't say anything or I could get in trouble. Or, this could be our little secret kind of thing, So yeah, so it was more like I was grabbed and it got to a point where I got very uncomfortable with it, and that continued until I could physically defend myself.
If you knew it was wrong, like how come you didn't say anything sooner?
I didn't say anything because I was being told, don't say anything, and this was by a person I was supposed to trust. If you're a kid and you look at these people as, oh, this is somebody I'm supposed to listen to, and they were telling me not to say anything. It really wasn't until my mom went to like hug me, or like if she would go to hug, how your parents will hug you just out of nowhere. And if I wasn't expecting it, I would get defensive, like physically defensive, and not mean to get to hurt anybody, but it was like more fending off because just for that quick second, I was back in that place where I was that scared kid who didn't know what I was doing, what to do.
I haven't experienced it, but I know exactly. I've heard exactly what you're talking about from other like podcasts and people talking. Like I understand completely what you're talking about.
And it even affected me into my relationship with my wife because it was before her. I had never been intimate with anybody, and if we were just sitting there and watching a movie, and if she went to like rub my leg or something, if I looked over and I saw her hand going, or out of the corner of my eye, if I saw her hand moving, I was fine. If she was suddenly rubbing my leg when I wasn't expecting it, I would freak out, I'd be like, no, oh God, I'm sorry, be something like that. And it wasn't until about, I want to say a few months into our relationship that I had told her why I was acting like that. And she understood. And that's actually why I'm glad that I've got somebody that actually went to school for she's not a practicing psychologist, but she went to school and studied psychology. So she knew exactly where I was coming from. I didn't have to explain it.
Would you say your life was like a lot because your cancer, your eye, ADHD, everything combined, like would you say your life was just different from everybody else's?
Yeah, because a lot of kids don't miss school. I mean, I know a lot of kids will miss school for medical issues. A lot of them will miss school for that, but a lot of them don't miss multiple days, I don't know how to say it, but yeah, I missed a lot of school because of it. So a lot of times when other kids were learning and moving at the speed that they should, I felt like I was always playing catch up because I was just gone so much,
Is that another reason for your bullying?
I think so, because a lot of them would be, 2 weeks ahead of me, and I'd be sitting there going like, wait, what does this mean? And everyone's like, what, are you stupid? We just learned that. And it's like, I didn't,
You're not necessarily, in the technical terms, stupid. You were just behind because you missed a lot of school.
Yeah, and a lot of my weekends and a lot of my nights were filled with homework, makeup work, stuff like that, so that I could try to keep up. So, when a lot of other kids were learning in the classrooms and were having fun, I was either going from doctor's office to a specialist to appointments, learning to stay alive, and then I was trying to catch up with regular schoolwork.
Was graduating super hard for you, like high school graduation?
It was. So I was actually where I needed to be when I was in the Sycamore School District. When I got to Rochester, because I was dealing with the anger and I was dealing with a lot of the PTSD and everything from the other abuse and everything else that was going on. I ended up failing a lot of classes. I actually graduated just by the skin of my teeth. In fact, it was kind of weird. When we moved to Rochester, Sycamore, and I don't know what it is now, but Sycamore had it where you had to have 4 years of gym class and 2 years of history. But when we moved to Rochester, they had it where you had to have 4 years of history and 2 years of gym class. Since I already had the gym class, I didn't have to go to gym class there, but I had to take 2 history classes because I had to take freshman history, and then I also had to take junior history, my like freshman year, and so I had 2 history classes that I had to make up for, and kind of learning about 2 different history things and having 2 different tests got to be a little much, and it got to where I actually had failed a few of my classes. And the only reason that I was able to graduate was because I made up one by doing a night class, a high school night class that they had in that town, and was able to make up for it. And then I failed my history final my senior year, and that was actually going to be the make or break if I was going to graduate or not. And I failed it, and because they didn't follow my IEP, the individual education program, they didn't follow it like right to the T. My mom fought for me to be able to retake the test, and because they retook it, I was able to take it again and pass. And I actually got an A. First time I failed it, second time I got an A+.
Is like that one of the reasons like you would stick up for somebody like in your own shoes?
Yes. Yeah, very much so. I have stuck up for somebody in a similar situation.
What are some of like you don't have to get like to the dot, but like what are some situations if you remember any?
So there have been times where I saw kids who were like special needs getting picked on and kind of kicked down because they were different, and I'm usually the one that then goes up to the bully and pushes them off to the side and like, get off of him. you know if they sit there and start making fun of them because they can't do a certain thing, I'm usually the one that will then find something that person can't do and start making fun of them for it and be like, see, that doesn't feel good, does it?
Everything we've talked about so far, like and how does your past feel that you're growing up?
I look back at it and realize how different it was than the average person. A lot of things that I didn't think bothered me as a kid are bothering me as an adult, just because I look at it and I'm like, wow, I really shouldn't have had to go through that. Growing up, you think everybody has to go through it, or you're just finding ways to just try to survive. But when you look back at it, you're like, I don't know. That's where a lot of this, I was actually told I've got CPTSD, which is chronic post-traumatic stress disorder, because there were so many things for so long. And I just kind of look at it, and usually I can kind of look at it and go, wow, I'm stronger than I thought I was. I'm stronger than I think I am now. But other times I'm just like, oh God, why did that have to happen?
Yeah, I understand that completely. Looking back, and bad stuff in hindsight, it'll most part can be good, in a way.
Yeah, in a way, because I also look at it as maybe I didn't have the most normal childhood or the most normal upbringing, but at the same time, because of that, I can see the world in a different way than most people can. Even with ADHD, because we can look at the world through a different lens, so to speak, just because our brains work differently. And then to have all that kind of stuff happen on top of that, I kind of look at it as, wow, the world can be a super ugly, nasty, dirty place, but if you look at it in the right way, it can also be the most beautiful thing you've ever seen, or that anybody could ever experience. I feel like if I didn't have all those experiences on top of the ADHD, maybe I'd be more of a downer, more of a like, why is this happening? Oh, woe is me, miserable, maybe living on the streets, drinking, slugging down vodka and trying to stay warm. And in fact, I think that a lot of what did happen to me has turned me into the person that I am today, that a lot of people seem to love.
Obviously, you have bad experiences, but like, are you happy with like how you turned out?
Overall, yes. I do wish that I was a little more like book smart, and I know a lot of that is because I spend so much time outside of the classroom, and then on top of that with ADHD, where it can just be harder to learn in a structured area anyway. But I do wish I was a little bit more book smart. But overall, I got a wife who loves me, family that supports me. So,
are you still dealing with cancer at this to this day?
Nope, I've been cancer free. I was luckily, so the kind of cancer that I had was retinoblastoma, and it was very rare at the time. And I was one of the lucky people who only had it once. It never came out of remission. It never relapsed or never came back in any way. So they said after, it's kind of an interesting story here, but they said after 5 years of being cancer free, you're deemed cancer free. However, when I was 18 and I was dealing with, my mom moving me to Minnesota and still dealing with that super angry kid phase, I was so angry I actually decided to start smoking, which is not the smartest thing to do in general, but not even less smart for somebody who's already had cancer. So I decided to start smoking. And of course, I was thinking I was being all bad. This is the grown up thing. You're not going to tell me what to do. And as disappointed as my parents were about that, I didn't learn my lesson until one day I went to a doctor. And he actually looked at me and he said, Adam, I'm not going to bullshit you. He's like, I can smell it. And I was like, what? Trying to lie to him, be like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I can smell the cigarettes, and I was like, okay. So eventually I told him, yeah. He's like, well, I'm not your mom and I'm not your dad. And I'm not going to tell you what to do. But the average person who starts smoking has, and he was just kind of throwing numbers out. He's like roughly about a 60-ish% chance of getting cancer from the cigarettes. You, even though the cancer cells are dead and you are deemed cancer free, you're more prone to have it. So if you don't stop, you're at about a 90% chance of getting cancer again. My recommendation is go break those things and don't smoke them again. So
Stop after that?
Yeah. I had 5 packs of cigarettes in my car and I broke 3 of them and I kept 2, and I don't know what possessed me to do that. But then when I saw a couple of my friends that smoked, I just handed them the packs and they were like, oh, thanks. I'm like, you really shouldn't thank me. But yeah, you can have them. Just gave them out. And then I've had cigars since then, but I've never had another cigarette after that.
How do you think your future will, like, in the end, like, how do you think your future will turn out?
Hopefully I'm trying to get more noticed on social media as a content creator. So I'm hoping my future turns out to be where I'm a content creator for Twitch and YouTube. And I'm hoping to use a lot of the experiences that I've had to maybe connect with people on a more personal level and let them know that they're not alone. People that have maybe been assaulted in all different ways, had all these medical stuff that made them feel like an outcast and got made fun of by the teachers, got made fun of by the kids, got made fun of by other adults, and let them know you're not alone. And look what happened to me. I became a success, and you can too. And hopefully I can be an inspiration to them.
Going into, like, video games, in the message when you were talking to me, you credited your grandfather for video games. Could you tell me a little more about that? Like, what do you mean by credit him?
So my grandfather, like I said, he was kind of in that realm where he didn't want to hear that you were getting bullied and picked on, but he was also the one that would give me the best advice on how to deal with it. One of the greatest things he ever said to me one day when I was upset and I was telling him about these kids that were picking on me, instead of just going like, oh, I don't want to hear it, he looked at me and he said, well, Adam, it's like the eternal question. Why are there more horses' asses in the world than there are horses? And I was like, that actually makes a lot of sense, and I didn't really have a good father figure growing up. My own dad was not a very good person, let alone a good father. So I turned to my grandfather for a lot of things. My grandfather saw that I needed the father figure, and he was the one that stepped up, telling me right from wrong. Not sure what's going on. There's like people screaming outside right now. Yeah, telling me, right from wrong. He was the one that would actually tell my mom to bring me over to his house, and just so that he could play ball with me, because he had a huge yard. It was like an acre of land, and it was just so he could play ball with me, or that he could show me how pocket knives work, how he could show me how, to change a tire, things like that. He knew that I needed some sort of male guidance, and I wasn't getting that. So just seeing what he went through, seeing how not really what he went through, but just seeing how he actually he gave a damn is basically what it boils down to. Where it didn't seem like a lot of people did, he did.
Created a gaming channel. Is that kind of like what got your mind into creating that?
Kind of. So one of the ways that I've dealt with a lot of things all throughout my life is I turn to the violent video games, and they don't have to be excruciatingly violent, especially now. But back when I was a kid, it was Grand Theft Auto, Manhunt, The Punisher, The Suffering. It was all these super intense violent games that got me through a lot of it because I would get super angry. And then I would just start ripping people apart on the game, and suddenly I felt better. As I got older, I kind of realized that I wanted to do more with video games, that I maybe wanted to even get in the industry. And I really didn't know how to break into an industry like that. Once my wife and I got moved to Wisconsin, I started learning more about Twitch. That's really when Twitch started taking off. So I started talking to people that did Twitch streams and started doing it myself, and started just kind of here and there. And then as I realized I was gaining any kind of interactions that I was getting there, and I was actually gaining friendships from the community that I had built, I started looking to maybe expand. And when we moved to the Sun Prairie area in Wisconsin, I went to a radio station there who actually was interested in having a video game show on their network. So I started doing a 1 hour thing where I kind of read a lot of the gaming news, and was getting a lot of people there, and started going to like different events as one of the DJs for the radio station. And my wife and I ended up moving to where we're at now in Kentucky. I couldn't keep doing the show there, but I was like, you know what? I really want to keep doing this. And that's where I started doing more stuff on Twitch. I started making my channel look more professional. And then we started the Goesnowwheredoesnothing podcast. I decided to get my friend Charlie in on it, and it's been going really good ever since. The greatest thing is when we were as a radio show, we would talk a lot, but I could at least play music to kind of give myself a break. And I'd play usually like 2 songs, 3 songs, whatever. But we couldn't swear. We had to actually be confined to the FCC. So we could say like mild swearing, but not anything intense. And I couldn't play a lot of the trailers for the video games that I was talking about. Now we got on here and we started doing the podcast, and we're like, wait, now we can swear, but we got to keep talking because you can't play music without Facebook or somebody pinging you, YouTube getting all mad. So we're finding other outlets to go where maybe we could turn it into like a music show, but we're sticking on YouTube and gaining a pretty good following so far. Working with my podcast, it's, especially now that I'm doing it with people, with Charlie, and he brought on his friend Brittany. A lot of that is actually helping us because all 3 of us have ADHD, and it's actually helping us reach a wider audience. We have a lot of fun with it. Hopefully we can get more butts in seats, so to speak, so we can get our channels monetized. But so that's just another way that video games and just media and entertainment have helped me through so much.
Has like been like a lesson itself. It seems like you've learned a lot, not like in a bad way, but like I think your life's been pretty interesting from what you told me. So thanks for coming on.
Oh, yeah, no problem.
And when I say go, you get 15 seconds to share anything that's on your mind. Company, website, anything you want. And go.
We actually have a Twitch page. We've actually opened up a merch store. If you go to seeksout.com, you can get one of our more famous shirts. It's actually a shirt that's got a gun on it, and it says, "Don't shoot your dick off."
Oh, well, unless there's anything you want to ask me or add, it was great having you, like I said, and thanks for coming on.
And then if you're interested, that whole "Don't Shoot Your Dick Up" t-shirt actually came from that armor person working in Hollywood. Brittany, who who was on the show. She's one of the hosts that we have. Her dad works in Hollywood, and he's been in there for a while. He actually, so an armor person is the person that makes sure that the guns, like if there's prop guns, he's the one that makes sure that they work properly. And he gave us quite a lot of information. But the funny thing was, he told us that those guns, when you have to use a real one on set, what they do is they hollow it out, but they don't hollow out the gun, they hollow out the bullet. And if it's one where the bullet's got to shoot forward, it actually will shoot at bullet speed coming out, and you only go about 6 feet. But when you're point blank range, that can still hurt, that can still kill you. So he said he actually had a gun on the set. I don't remember what movie it was, but the director grabbed one of the guns that had bullets in it, started flipping it around, and literally started putting it down his pants, like without checking to make sure that the safety was on or anything. So Matt, which was her dad, yelled out, he's like, "Hey, don't shoot your off." So he took the gun, he actually emptied it out, then handed it back to the director. He's like, "Now you can play with it." So I was like, okay, that's Charlie said that saying belongs on a shirt. So we were like, yes, that's now one of the more popular shirts that we have. It's actually popular with both gun people and anti-gun people, and I'm like, I think we just unified everybody with this.